So this is a very interesting article called The Stain on the Wall. Something that touches me personally, first as a Jewish person, second as a child of a family whose most of the members were murdered in the Holocaust in Europe. Thirdly, as a person who loves art, and then as a person who lived in Zurich, Switzerland, and visited the Kunsthaus many, many times and paid for membership throughout the years when I was living there. It doesn't cost a lot to be a member there, and they always had exquisite taste in art and always got the best art. So, very interesting article by an Israeli journalist called The Stain on the Wall. So apparently there is an exhibit now in Zurich that shows art that had been stolen from Jews during the Holocaust. And Switzerland finally faces its past and its evil, but not really neutral past. So it's all about this art dealer called Emile Borle, I don't know how you pronounce his name, that took over art that was abandoned by a Jewish person that had to flee Paris during the war. Okay, so 8 horses and their riders and the background of beautiful mountains. This art was the beginning of, it says it's an art, it's a painting by Edgar Degas from the year 1880, and it's considered one of the first of the new age of impressionism, this period of art, Impressionism. So year afterwards, not far from the studio of Degas in Paris, there was a Jewish French person born called Paul Rosenberg. He's the son of an antique dealer in art that was very passionate about art, and his father taught him about art. And already as a young boy, Rosenberg could recognize many talented artists on the way, and he purchased their first paintings. So he was supporting the arts. And he was one of the most important galleries. He was running one of the most important galleries of the beginning of the 20th century, and a very important patron of the art in America and the US. And he was supporting Pablo Picasso, Mary Laurenson, and Georges Braque, and Fernand Lazet, and Henri Matisse. In 1940, when the Nazis invaded France, Rosenberg had to close his gallery in Paris, and he escaped to New York. And he had to leave behind a lot of his art, his beloved art pieces. One of them was this piece by Degas that he bought in 1924. The Reich, the force of the Reich, the Nazis, they took over Jewish property, and they came to Rosenberg's gallery, and they took over all his art gallery, all the art pieces that were there. He had to leave them behind. And a lot of art pieces afterwards that were stolen from the Jews. Also, this one came to the public house Theodor Fischer in the Swiss city of Lucerne. There, the Swiss industrialist Emile Borle purchased it in 1942 and added it to his collection. These days, you can view this masterpiece along other Impressionists art pieces from the collection of Bourlet in the Kunsthaus in the Art Museum of the city of Zurich in Switzerland. But this is not an exhibit about Impressionism, and it's not about art collections of Bourlet, but it is in the middle of a question. Should art be shown when it's been purchased in an immoral way? The work that presents that there is breathtaking. All the great names: Picasso, Monet, Manet, Van Gogh, and others. So whoever wants to can enjoy the artistic side, but it's hard to do it because the Kunsthaus, the museum, also decided to call it the future for the past. And in the headline, the Bourlet collection: art, context, war, and conflict. This is not the first time that the art is displayed in the museum, but it's the first time that the museum brings into expression also the history, the problematic history that is connected to this. Art history, it cannot be separated. The history of art cannot be separated. The people of the museum say when they chose to show Rodin, for example, next to, they have a very elaborate explanation how it was purchased by Bourlet. The art pieces are or a year ago purchased. They're presented with the year they were purchased by Bourlet. Those art pieces, they're also parallel to the year of the purchase of these paintings. There's also an example, an explanation about the historical events that followed that year. So the people that visit the exhibit also view the art pieces of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. But what really catches the attention is what happened to these paintings. In a very strong blue paint, the art pieces that were originally came from Jewish collectors, and they are suspected that they were stolen by the Nazis, or that their owners were forced to sell them quickly and in a very low price because they were escaping a concentration camp. It's an example of there's example of Claude Monet, Poppy Seeds by Vatril. Claude Monet, painted in 1897. It was in the collection of a Jewish German art collector, Max Amadan. During the war, Amadan lived in Switzerland and his life was saved, but he had to sell all his art collection in order to survive. And then this beautiful painting got to Borlée at a very low price. These days, the grandchildren of Hamdan want this painting returned to the family. Emile Georg Borlée was born in Germany in 1896, and at the age of 32, he moved to Switzerland and became a very successful industrialist. When he came to get accepted to the high society of Switzerland, thanks to his art collection, he began to purchase art collections. He began to purchase art. And mostly Impressionism, French Impressionism. And he became a patron of the Kunsthaus, the Museum of Art in Zurich. Became part of its directorion. And he lent a lot of paintings to various exhibitions. In 1941, Borlée decided that the museum needs to expand, and he contributed 2 million francs. It's about 8 million shekels now for the new museum, for the new exhibit, to a new part of the museum. This was one of the most profitable years in the career of Borlée, thanks to the fact that a year before, in 1940, his arms industry, called WOB. Wait, I have to go closer, sorry. I'm translating as I'm reading it in Hebrew, right? He had a weapons factory, WOB, and it provided weapons not only to the Allies for 80 million francs, but also he got a special permission from the government of Switzerland. He began selling weapons also to Germany, Italy, Romania, the fascists, for 420 million francs. And then Borlée dealt with Germany, with the German weapons industry, Voltner, that also in Berlin was working, and there they hired women from concentration camps. And it's known that after the war, when the Red Army came, the prisoners, the women prisoners working there, had to go on a death march. But they were released by the Russians just minutes before the Nazis were able to kill them. So Borlée became one of the biggest exports of weapons in the world, and to the one who occupied in Canton Zurich, he was the biggest employer in Canton Zurich. In 1945, Borlée was the richest person in Switzerland, and he had property around 160 million francs. At the same time, Borlée wanted to expand his business and to buy the Swiss textile firm Disporet, that sold. The people there were Wolf, a Jewish family that escaped to America, afraid of the Nazis will also come to Switzerland. So he bought their factory, and the profit were very big because the name he had like a special name. It was called the Project of Education and Discipline, and what is it called? The social workers of Switzerland, the ones who were in charge of social work, forced young women from very difficult background to work in those factories for very low pay. Yeah, Borlée was running it, and very difficult conditions. And so Borlée made money from selling weapons to Nazis and from exploiting poor women. And the Kunsthaus in Zurich was making a lot of money from the profit of Borlée. In 1956, when he was 66, he died all of a sudden, and his widow and his two children inherited the impressionistic, the great impressionistic art collection that included 633 paintings of the greatest paintings ever painted in the world. And they decided to give a third, 223 of them, to lend it to long term to the Kunsthaus. In 1958, there was a new part of the exhibit, and it brought the one who donated, the money. It was dedicated to Borlée. They made a big name for him, and a special beautiful part of the museum was dedicated to him for like 1,200 meters. And this is the first show of this collection. Already then, people were talking about the exhibit, and people were talking whether they should call the gallery in his name, ignoring his past and his part and the part of the this paintings in the past of these paintings. He was able to purchase them from exploiting poor women and from dealing with Nazi Germany, promoting the weapons of Nazi Germany. So finally they changed the name to just, they took down his name. The controversy in the Kunsthaus was was died down. But then in another city in Switzerland in 2014, there was an historical artistic event. The museum, this very small little museum of Bern, got inheritance 1,500 art pieces from the greatest artists in the world: Marc Chagall, Paul Cézanne, Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, and Kandinsky, Henri Matisse, Paul Gauguin, and many others. This rare collection who gave it? Cornelius Gourlitz, the son of Hildebert Gourlitz, who was an art dealer of Adolf Hitler, and he was feeling guilty. So Gourlitz, the son, inherited the collection, and he gave it to the Swiss Museum in Bern because he felt that Germany, he thought that they wouldn't trace the Jewish owners of these art pieces. The inheritance was given to the museum under one condition: that they would look for the Jewish. He actually wanted them to look for the Jewish owners, the original Jewish owners, and to give it to their children. After 7 years of art historian searched for it, they said they give up this, and whoever thinks the owners will take it. They offered it to the original owners, whoever claims it. The museum didn't find any proof, and then they decided to keep it. But then it turned out that the Cultural Center of Switzerland made this woman responsible for these art pieces. Today, 80 years after the end of the World War II, you can already say cautiously that Switzerland is trying to deal with its dark past. There were not few dark past. And when they were checking the silent bank accounts in the 90s, it came out that a lot of Swiss banks kept the money of Jews. Many of them gave the money when they were escaping the Holocaust, and those that stole money from them. But not only did the banks take advantage of the war to make a profit, also the industrialists and the art collectors, Swiss art collectors like Bourlet, like Gallery Fischer, they conducted public sales, and they sold art that was stolen from Jews. And the famous shoe company in Switzerland, Bally Shoes, bought those years several German shoe companies that were taken away from Jewish owners, that was stolen from Jewish owners. And a lot of Swiss diamond industrialists, Swiss diamond merchants also bought diamonds that were stolen from Jews. Switzerland also directly dealt with Germany in golds. Some of the gold private people that escaped or were killed, sometimes it was gold that were from teeth that were taken away from bodies. And in 1944, they found documentation that the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, directly sent a train full of gold, jewelry, and art collection from Germany to be kept in vaults in the Swiss banks. So Jewish property was welcomed in Switzerland. The Jewish refugees were not welcomed at all. In 1938, the head of the Swiss police, Heinrich Rothmund, asked that Germany will he had the idea that the passports of Jews will have the letter J, so that the Swiss border control will know to identify amongst all the Germans escaping German Jews that maybe want to stay in Switzerland, because their other option was concentration camps. Most of the Jews that tried to enter Switzerland were arrested, and then they were murdered in concentration camps in Germany. There were very few Jews that were allowed to come in, but not to stay more than World War II, most of them. So they were not allowed to stay after World War II if they were allowed to come in. So this was the case with Kastner train, that the refugees came to Switzerland in 1944. They stayed only till the end of the war, and then they were asked to leave, go back to their homeland or to another place. that will have them. By the way, the only place that would have them was Israel and Palestine, but the British were not allowing them to come there either. They had to fight to come in. In 1996, with the pressure of Americans, there was the Washington Agreement with the Swiss banks and the Jewish Congress, World Jewish Congress, WJC, and WJRO, the International Jewish Property Organization, and that would be a very, very thorough investigation about returning the bank accounts, the dormant bank accounts of Jews. And for 20 years, they worked together with banks, lawyers, and historians from all over the world to give back the refugees and their children what they had coming, their money. But it looks like that today Switzerland is ready to face its past, also without international pressure. And back to Zurich. In 1921, there's a new part in the Kunsthaus, and again an exhibit from Bourlet, and again there's a public outrage, even more now, because the one who was in charge of this exhibit was called Lucas Glor, and he was the head of the Bourlet Foundation. And he was, and you could read a little bit about the work, where the paintings, where they came from. But among Swiss, that run Bern, it's in Bern it's very transparent, whereas the Kunsthaus try to hide things. The Jewish community is very upset from the way the Kunsthaus ignores the past. And the Swiss politician Rolf Levin, who's the head of the Jewish Federation of Switzerland, and he said they wanted to stop the exhibit, and then they also wanted a more critical exhibit. And Levin and the Jewish community are quite calm, they're not extreme. The Swiss historian Erich Keller published a book called The Dirty Museum, and then he follows the past, the outrageous past of Bourlet, and he's very angry on the collaboration with the museum, with the Bourlet Foundation. The book caused waves and outrage, and the original owners of the work can be compensated, but you cannot compensate on the work that they bought from. These work of arts were bought by money, immoral money, says Keller in an interview to this Israeli paper Haaretz. The Kunsthaus had to disconnect all ties with the Bourlet Foundation and to give the works of art back to their owners and to the ones who inherited, and the ones who inherited the Bourlet Foundation, one of the richest family of Switzerland, didn't compensate the workers in their textile, the women forced to work in their textile company. They didn't take responsibility on the collaboration with the Nazis, and they didn't say sorry. They didn't offer an apology. So Keller shows that he is a change in Switzerland. No more international pressure is needed, but the Swiss, some of the Swiss at least, are willing to deal with the past. In the Kunsthaus, this change from Christoph Becker, the head of the Kunsthaus, left, and there's a new woman called Anne de Mister. And de Mister brought a new spirit, and she wants to, she doesn't want it to be called the temple of guilt, like the Swiss comedian Patrick Karpichenko called it, but she decided to, together with art historians and experts, to show the different perspectives. The work on this exhibit started with a historical research of who owns these pieces of art that were purchased by Borlée during the Nazi times between 1933 and 1945, and also in the years afterwards until his death in 1956. The research continues for very long months and cost 750,000 francs. And the research is presented in this new exhibit, and also caused the Borlée Foundation to open negotiation with the children of the Jewish owners of these art pieces, of these paintings, to decide on a compensation or to give them back to the families, the Jewish families that owned them. And another thing that was found, in 1941, a group of art patrons from Zurich with Borlée went to Paris that was occupied by Nazis to buy impressionistic paintings at low prices. So 1941, Switzerland supposedly neutral, Jews are being murdered in concentration camps and being persecuted and sent in carts to their deaths. But what does Borlée do? That he goes to buy art because it's very cheap now that the Jews have been placed in concentration camps. In order to supervise this research, Zurich has an independent historian called Raphael Graham that was running the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt and is the president of the historical museum in Berlin. And what's his name? Raphael Gross, sorry. His name is Raphael Gross. And a year ago, Gross published his conclusion that the research is fair, but you have to continue it. Also beyond 1945, also then Jews were forced to sell art paintings very cheap because they were persecuted. And in the only interview he gave to the Swiss media, the Gross said, it doesn't say that all the collection is stolen goods, but we have to see once more if we have to check it one more time. They have to continue the research. And the history of the collection reflects Borlée and Switzerland, and also the cultural history of Jewish Europe. In an interview, he explained what he meant. Jewish art collectors actively promoted the Impressionism by buying their paintings of these young artists. They were unknown, but often they were controversial, and the Impressionism was part of their culture. And in the exhibit, there's a feeling that the museum really does want to hear the opinion of the public on the collection. And the public is invited to answer a lot of questions about moral questions. And it's on a tablet. And the public, they want the public to be active in trying to see the role of the museum in society. Is it moral to show the Bourlet collection in the museum? Do you think they should show the problematic art? Or would you like to see it in the future? How would you like to see it in the future? One of the people that are working in the museum says that from 30,000 people that were filling in the questionnaires, 70% think that the art, the paintings, has to be shown in the context, in the problematic context. At the end of the exhibit, the people that come to the exhibit can also draw or write how they can see the museum in the future. In the first year to the exhibit, every Wednesday, there's an open discussion with the public. It's really interesting to what people think. The exhibit is a process and not an end. Every generation of the museum has its chaotic moment, Bourlet moment, and we're trying to solve it in a way that will reflect our period and the elephant in the room. We cannot solve it, but we can take the role of the museum in conducting talk about this and dealing with the past, Switzerland, the history of Switzerland. Something else is the way there's the blue curtains